Hello everyone and welcome to the first revision video on a new subject today. We're having a look at Biology Unit 1 minus Ecology. That's 3 chapters, so I thought I'd give that its own video. So a couple of tips: pause whenever you need, screenshot whenever you want, watch the first time without taking notes, and then of course on your second watch, take notes then, and change the video speed if you need. There's not going to be any review questions for this because they're very short and simple chapters. We're going to look at the scientific method, characteristics of life, and food. So first, having a look at the scientific method. So the steps of the scientific method: first you have your observation, which is just you notice something. Then you have your hypothesis, which is your educated guess based on your observations. Your experiment is what you make and design to test your hypothesis. Your result is what happens in your experiment. Then you're going to interpret your data. You're basically going to record what happens and then analyze it. Your conclusion is going to be a summary of what happens. And then if your conclusion agrees with your hypothesis, then you support the conclusion. If it kind of agrees, then you can change your hypothesis. And if it doesn't agree, then you reject your hypothesis. Then you have a theory, which is a hypothesis that's been supported by a lot of evidence and experiments. And a principle is a theory that has been proven to be true over time. So just a quick guide to experiments. Good experiments should be safe. This can be measures like tying your hair back, wearing gloves and goggles, reporting any accidents, not touching flames, being careful with glass, not putting a toaster in the bathtub, stuff like that. It has to be done with a control experiment, which is basically a second experiment that you do to compare whatever you're changing. So, for example, if you're testing how good plants grow with sunlight, your control can be you put it in the cupboard away from the sun. Your independent variable is what you're changing in your control. So, for example, the sun, and then your dependent variable is what happens because of that. So, for example, the plant might grow worse. It should also be fair and free from bias. So if you're interviewing people, if you're doing an experiment on people, have a large sample, select from a lot of people, select randomly, pull names out of a hat, obviously use a control experiment, and do double blind testing. Double blind testing is especially when you're doing like drugs and kind of painkillers and stuff like that. You give one group the real test and one group the fake test, and no one actually knows which one is real and which one is fake. Only the scientist experimenter knows. And also, your experiments should be able to be replicated, which basically means you publish them in a scientific journal so that other people can try out your experiment for themselves. So, a couple of general notes. Edward Jenner is a really good example of the scientific method working in real life. He noticed that if someone who worked with cows got cowpox and then recovered, that they were protected from getting it in the future. So, what he did is he actually took pus from a cowpox victim who had recovered and then injected that into a normal, healthy boy. And the boy actually didn't end up getting cowpox in his later life. Now, obviously, there are some limitations of the scientific method. Our own lack of knowledge, like sometimes we don't actually know what to look for and what to experiment for. You can have badly designed experiments that we end up getting fake results, or if we have really difficult results, we might not understand them properly and we don't come to the right conclusions. Or you can have accidental discoveries, like Alexander Fleming in 1928 left a petri dish and he accidentally discovered that penicillin could kill bacteria. That was completely an accident. And also, the world changes naturally, like species evolve through evolution. Like, if bacteria can evolve to be immune to some forms of antibiotics. And ethics means if something is right or wrong, and there's a lot of arguments if the scientific method is ethical in certain topics, like using animals in experiments, so like testing makeup on rats, and also cloning animals. You can have medical issues like artificial contraception, abortion, IVF, which is kind of when you grow babies in test tubes. Like, how ethical is it to produce a human and not like make one naturally? And also freezing sperm and embryos, which is kind of the same argument as abortion, that these are like unborn lives, and also using embryos to make stem cells to basically create any cell in the body for people who are sick or might need them. So moving on to the characteristics of life. So a couple of definitions. An organism is a living thing. Metabolism is the sum of all the chemical reactions in the body. These are controlled by enzymes. And continuity of life means that organisms come from other organisms of the same species. Now you have 5 characteristics of life. You have organization. This basically means that organisms are made of cells, and cells come together and form tissues, and tissues come together and form organs, and organs come together and form systems. Nutrition means that organisms need food to survive. Plants make their own food from photosynthesis. Animals get food from consuming other plants and animals. Excretion means that organisms need to get rid of metabolic waste. For us, that would be sweating, breathing, or peeing. Plants make a lot less waste than animals. Usually, there's a couple of exceptions. The response is that organisms react to changes around them. These changes are called stimuli. You can say you're really stimulated. This is because you're responding to all the stimuli that's around you. So animals usually have faster responses than plants. And reproduction is that organisms make new organisms that are the same type as them. So asexual reproduction in plants means that they make exact copies with one parent, and sexual reproduction in animals, you need gametes, which are basically sex cells, your eggs and your sperm, and that has DNA from two parents. That also means that our offspring as animals are a bit different than the parent, whereas in plants, because it's one parent, it's exactly the same. So moving on to food, introduction to food, anabolic reactions turn small molecules to big molecules. For example, photosynthesis. I like to think of anabolic steroids, how they make your muscles grow. Anabolic means small to big. Catabolic means that big molecules are being broken down into small molecules like respiration. Don't worry too much about these are going to be covered in other units. So you have six main elements of food: carbon C, hydrogen H, oxygen O, nitrogen N, phosphorus P, sulfur S. Your five salts in food is your sodium Na, your chlorine Cl, magnesium Mg, potassium K, and calcium Ca. And your three trace elements, which you don't find that much, but they're still in food a little bit, is your iron Fe, copper Cu, and your zinc Zn. So biomolecules are chemicals that are made inside a living thing. These are your carbohydrates, your lipids, your proteins, and your vitamins, which we're going to have a look at now. So carbohydrates and fats. Well, carbohydrates first, these contain carbon and water, as you can kind of guess from the name, carbo, hydro. So these are in the formula CxH2YY. This basically means they have carbon in one ratio and water in another ratio, and these can be monosaccharides. You have one sugar. So an example of this is fructose in fruit. You can have disaccharides, which is two sugars. For example, sucrose, which is your normal table sugar, or polysaccharides, which is a lot of sugars bonded together. For example, starch in bread and pasta. The difference between mono and di and poly is that polysaccharides aren't sweet and they don't dissolve in water, whereas fructose and sucrose, they're very sweet and they do dissolve in water. So animals store carbohydrates as glycogen, which is a polysaccharide and is stored in the liver, and plants store carbohydrates as starch. Cellulose, which is another polysaccharide, is used to form plant cell walls, and glucose, which is a monosaccharide, is broken down in respiration, which releases energy in animals, and it's made in photosynthesis for energy in plants. And we get carbs from eating bread, pasta, rice, cereals, etc. You know this from if you do the food pyramid, maybe you're going to recognize how we get carbohydrates. Your lipids or your fats, these also contain carbon and water, but they're just in different ratios than carbohydrates. So fats are your lipids that are solid at room temperature, and oils are your lipids that are liquid at room temperature. Now, triglycerides have one glycerol and three fatty acids, and phospholipids, basically, they have a glycerol and two fatty acids, but they replace one of them with a phosphate. We're going to have a look at how they're made in a second. So, plants and animals, they store lipids for food and energy. Animals store lipids for heat and also as a fatty layer to protect our organs like our heart. Lipids help make up the cell membrane in every cell, and they're broken down in respiration, releasing energy, and they can store twice as much energy as carbs, so they're really useful. And we get lipids from fat in meat, from butter, from oil, etc. And this is what I was saying before. You have the triglycerides and the phospholipids. The triglyceride is on the left, you have your three fatty acids, and your phospholipid on the right has two fatty acids and a phosphate. Now, your proteins and vitamins. Your proteins contain carbon and water, like fats, and carbohydrates, but they also have nitrogen. Sometimes they can also contain sulfur, phosphorus, and iron, and there's no ratio to how they're formed. Proteins are made up of amino acids, which are joined by peptide bonds, and your amino acids will join up to make peptides, which, when they form together, make polypeptide chains, and that's basically how proteins are made. And there's 20 common amino acids. So an amino acid contains a hydrogen atom, an amino group, a carboxyl group, and a side chain. I'm going to show you the diagram in a second. So keratin is a protein that's in your hair and nails, and myosin is a protein that's in your muscles. Enzymes are also proteins, and we saw these control reactions in metabolism, and they also can form antibodies for fighting infections. So your fibrous proteins are your long, strong, and tough proteins. For example, keratin in your hair and nails, your hair is really straight, long, and strong. And your globular protein is a very round protein that has a lot of folding. For example, albumin in egg whites. We get protein from meat, fish, eggs, milk, beans, nuts, etc. This is how an amino acid looks. It has your carbon in the middle with your hydrogen atom. Then it has an amino group on the left. It has your carboxyl group on the right, and it has your side chain on the top. Now, vitamins are complex carbon substances that the body isn't able to make on its own, but we only need these in tiny amounts. So, your vitamin C is your water soluble vitamin. Basically, vitamin C dissolves in water, and we need it for our connective tissue like our gums, our skin, and our cartilage. We need it for healthy bones and teeth, and we need it for fighting infections and wounds in the body. We get vitamin C mostly from fresh fruit and vegetables. A lack of vitamin C causes scurvy, which leads to your skin bruising and healing poorly, and your gums start to bleed and you get really loose teeth. This isn't really a problem nowadays, but it was a problem back in the day with sailors because you couldn't transport fresh fruit and vegetables. You couldn't keep them fresh, so they didn't have anything to give them vitamin C. So a lot of sailors back in the day would get scurvy. Your vitamin D is your fat soluble vitamin. Basically, this dissolves in fats, and we need it for healthy bones and teeth. We mainly get it from milk and also from sunlight. A lack of vitamin D can cause rickets, which basically leads to weak and deformed bones that can break really easily. So, your minerals and water, we only need minerals in a small amount. So plants get their minerals from salts in the soil that they're growing in. They need magnesium to form chlorophyll, which basically helps them with photosynthesis. And they need calcium for the cement that joins cell walls together. Animals, we get our minerals from eating food. We need iron in our meat for hemoglobin in the blood, which we're going to have a look at in the circulatory system. And we need calcium from dairy for healthy bones and teeth. If you see the milk ads, they say a good source of calcium for healthy bones and teeth. That's why. And water is what makes up most living things, makes up about 70% of humans and 90% of plants. It's where metabolism takes place. It provides transport for organisms, and a lot of organisms live in water, not just fish. Tiny microorganisms also live in water as well. Water is found in cytoplasm in the cells, and it's also found in body fluids like your blood plasma. It's a really good solvent and it's able to carry a lot of different molecules. It's really important for photosynthesis, for respiration, and for digestion. These are all things we're going to look at in later videos. And it also helps plant cells to keep their shape. We're also going to have a look at that in osmosis. Water is also a really good absorber of heat and it's able to maintain your body temperature. We're going to have a look at this in homeostasis. So that's all for today. This was really quick, really simple. You don't really need to do any revision questions. Just really kind of memorize those notes and you'll be good for any questions that come up on your exam about these subjects. I'll be back in the next one with ecology and I hope to get that out really, really soon. So thanks very much for listening and I'll see you in the next one.